The first scream was swallowed by stone. Inside the smoke-drenched chamber of a Mayan temple, a boy no older than 16 pushed a stingray spine through his flesh, guided by trembling hands that had been trained since childhood to mask fear. Blood didn't just drip, it pooled, soaking into bark paper that would later be burned as an offering. His name would be forgotten by history, but his pain was not. That pain was currency. It was proof. It was power. And without it, the Maya believed the universe itself might collapse. Imagine this, your first test of leadership, not a speech, not a battle, but the mutilation of your own body in front of gods who never forgive weakness. Fail to bleed enough, hesitate even once, and your birthright is gone, your family disgraced, your lineage severed. The cosmos, they believed, could sniff out cowardice. And in this world, cowardice meant death. But what you are about to learn goes far beyond ritual. It is a forbidden truth about how civilizations, ancient and modern, weaponize suffering, sexuality, and blood to control men. The Mayans believed the most sacred offering was genital bloodletting, the most intimate pain turned into divine fuel. Through agony, kings were forged. Through mutilation, queens spoke with gods. And through cycles of blood, an empire sustained its grip on millions of lives. Ask yourself, how does a civilization convince its nobility, its strongest, most ambitious young men, to willingly tear themselves apart? The answer isn't just religion. It's psychology. It's manipulation. It's the same playbook you'll find echoed in every empire, every institution that seeks to dominate. Break a man through his most primal instincts, sex, survival, pain, and you own him forever. The Maya didn't just practice bloodletting, they perfected it. Stingray spines, obsidian blades, ropes embedded with thorns. Implements designed not only to wound but to transform suffering into spectacle, prophecy, and political legitimacy. And what's more disturbing, they believed that without this suffering, the sun itself would refuse to rise. That's how deep the control ran. And here's where the hook sinks deeper. You think these rituals died with the ancient world? No. The blueprint of control survived. The faces have changed. The temples have changed. But the sacrifice demanded from men has not. You were never meant to know this. But now you do. The ritual didn't begin with the spine. It began weeks earlier, in silence, in hunger, in the deliberate unmaking of a boy's identity. The Maya understood something that modern systems of power also exploit. Before you can break a body, you must first fracture the mind. A young prince would be isolated beneath the temple, entombed in darkness where dripping water replaced the passage of time. Days without food stripped away his sense of self. Hallucinogens, morning glory seeds, sacred toad venom, cacao laced with poison, opened gateways between reality and madness. When the priests finally dragged him into the light, he was no longer a boy. He was a vessel, raw and hollow, waiting to be filled with a truth that wasn't his own. By the time the stingray spine pierced him, he wasn't just bleeding. He was being rewritten. His body was now an altar. His pain, a contract. Every scream fed the illusion that the gods were listening, that his suffering carried cosmic weight. And maybe he believed it. This is the genius of psychological control. Convince a man that his agony serves a higher purpose, and he will endure the unendurable. Convince him that his suffering fuels the very survival of the world, and he will compete to bleed more than his rivals. In Maya courts, young nobles didn't avoid the blade, they fought for it. Because the deeper the wound, the greater the prestige. Think about that. The line between torture and initiation blurred until mutilation became honor, until survival itself meant nothing without proof of endurance. This is how empires are built, not on stone or steel, but on the programmed obedience of men trained to bleed for symbols. The blood spilled on bark paper wasn't just a sacrifice, it was intelligence. Priests read the splatters like prophecies. Messages of drought, of war, of which cities would fall. The pain of the individual became statecraft. His mutilation wrote the destiny of kingdoms. And here's where the darkness sharpens. This wasn't random cruelty. It was systemic. Every cut, every thorn, every hallucinogenic vision was engineered to bind the boy's identity to the survival of the empire. He no longer belonged to himself. He belonged to the gods, and to those who claimed to speak for them. The question is, how different is this from what you live in now? If the prince's pain kept the sun rising, the queen's agony opened the mouth of prophecy. Among the Maya, women of royal blood were not spared. They were chosen. Their bodies became bridges between the living and the divine, their suffering the thread that stitched kingdoms to gods. And what they endured makes even the prince's mutilation seem almost merciful. Picture a queen, her body weakened from 20 days of fasting, lips cracked from drinking nothing but a fermented honey brew mixed with hallucinogenic bark. She kneels before an altar, attendants gripping her shoulders as obsidian needles pierce her tongue. A jade bowl waits beneath her chin, eager to catch every drop. The rope prepared for her isn't studded with thorns like the one used on men. No, hers is woven from human hair, the hair of women who died in childbirth, braided together with fibers of hallucinogenic vines. Each pass of this hair rope through her tongue tears the wound wider, flooding her mouth with blood until her words dissolve into gurgling whispers. To the untrained eye, it looks like torment. To the Maya priesthood, it was revelation. As her vision blurred, the pain forced her consciousness beyond the veil. In that blood-soaked trance, she became oracle, her agony unlocking messages from gods that priests eagerly recorded. Which armies to raise, which captives to slaughter, which alliances to betray, all decided by the mutilated tongue of a starving queen. Now stop and think about the brilliance of this design. Men proved their worth through suffering of the flesh, but women's blood was demanded to pierce the veil of reality itself. Two halves of power, locked in a system where pain was the ultimate language of legitimacy. Queens and kings bled differently, but for the same master, the empire. And yet, beneath the ritual, another truth burns. These women weren't just participants. They were symbols. Their bodies were made into sacred theaters, their agony transformed into propaganda. Every scream, every drop of blood was staged proof that the royal line was chosen by the gods themselves. And the people believed it, because how could they not? They saw their rulers bleed. They saw them suffer. And they mistook that suffering for holiness. Do you see the pattern now? Power is never just taken. It is performed. It is sanctified through blood. And the more terrifying the performance, the deeper the people submit. The Maya knew a secret every empire learns eventually: power is not power unless it is seen. That's why the most sacred bloodletting rituals weren't hidden in private chambers, they were staged before thousands. Imagine the scene. A vast plaza, the temple towering like a stone mountain, its steps rising into the clouds. The air thick with incense smoke that stings the eyes and masks the scent of blood. Drums thunder in relentless rhythm, rattles shake, conch shells bellow, and every sound hammers into the chest like a second heartbeat. Crowds gather, peasants, warriors, merchants, all watching as their king ascends the steps. They already know what he must do. He will bleed for them, bleed for the gods, bleed for the survival of the universe. And in watching him endure, they too are bound to the empire's illusion, that pain feeds order, that suffering keeps the world alive. The ritual becomes theater. And the audience is not passive. They are complicit. The king pierces himself, the queen drags the thorned cord through her tongue, the priests hold up bark paper soaked in royal blood. Then the paper is burned. Flames consume it, smoke rises, and the crowd believes that smoke carries their ruler's agony to the heavens. At that moment, terror transforms into awe. The people cheer. They weep. They kneel. Here lies the brilliance: by forcing the masses to watch, the ritual became a mirror. Each person in the crowd saw their own fear reflected back at them, fear of the gods, fear of chaos, fear of what might happen if the king failed. And so they accepted their place. They obeyed. They gave up their freedom, not because chains bound them, but because they believed the chains were cosmic necessity. This is how institutions condition loyalty. They make suffering sacred. They make spectacle into truth. And once you accept that the blood of your rulers keeps the sun burning in the sky, you will never rebel. Because rebellion wouldn't just be treason. It would be the end of the world. Look closer, and you'll see the pattern still alive today. Public suffering paraded as legitimacy. Sacrifice framed as proof of leadership. Ritual staged, not for gods, but for you, for your submission, your obedience, your silence. The Maya were not savages. They were architects of psychological theater. And their stage still echoes in every system of power you kneel to without even realizing it. Every drop of blood carried a price. Not just in flesh, but in identity. The young noble who pierced himself, the queen who dragged the rope through her tongue, they did not walk away the same. They walked away emptied. Reforged. Their pain was no longer their own. It had been claimed, branded, and transformed into property of the empire. That's the hidden cost of every system built on ritualized suffering. The moment your agony is reframed as sacred, your individuality dissolves. You are no longer a man with his own will, you are a vessel for the survival of something larger, something that feeds on your sacrifice. The Maya perfected this. By the time a boy became king, his mind belonged more to the gods and the priests than to himself. His body was an altar. His suffering, a tax. But listen closely, this blueprint never vanished. The stage is different now. No stingray spine. No blood-soaked bark paper. But you still bleed. Your time, your energy, your spirit, bled dry for systems that call your exhaustion, duty, your despair, responsibility, your silence, maturity. The same trick, just modernized. And here's the part most men never grasp, the empire doesn't need your rebellion. It needs your complicity. It needs you to nod, to endure, to call your own chains necessary. Because when you accept the suffering handed to you as if it were holy, you've already surrendered. This is why you must awaken. This is why you must reclaim what the ancients weaponized against their own people, the power to suffer for yourself, not for them. The moment you see the chains, the moment you recognize the ritual, you can step out of it. But here is the test, the same kind of test the Maya prince faced in that dark chamber. Will you bleed for the empire? Or will you bleed for yourself? If you've followed me this far, if your mind feels the shift, lock it in right now. Comment the phrase, "My blood is mine," and then write it again. Twice. To mark the moment you refuse to feed systems that were built to drain you. Because once you see this, once you say it aloud, you are no longer who you were. The Maya did not choose the genitals or the tongue by accident. They understood what most men today have forgotten, that the greatest power within the human body is bound to sex and speech. The act of spilling blood from these places was more than mutilation, it was the hijacking of life force itself. Think about it. The penis is the channel of creation. Through it, kings pass on bloodlines, dynasties, legacies. To pierce it was to pierce the root of power, to offer the seed of the future as payment to the gods. The tongue, equally sacred, shapes reality through words. To bleed from it was to sacrifice not just flesh, but voice, identity, the ability to define truth itself. These wounds weren't just physical. They were symbolic executions of freedom. And the priests knew exactly what they were doing. They turned sexual energy, the force of creation, into a contract of obedience. They turned the spoken word, the power to resist, into an oracle scripted by their hands. That is how you bind an entire civilization, cut a man where he is strongest, make him believe that his wound is holy, and he will never reclaim himself. Look at the brilliance, and the horror. By ritualizing sexual mutilation, they ensured that every nobleman's masculinity was owned by the gods. By tearing open the queen's tongue, they ensured that every prophecy she spoke came soaked in pain, legitimized by suffering, impossible to doubt. What choice did the people have, when both king and queen bled publicly for them? The empire was written in blood, enforced through flesh, sanctified by agony. But here is the question no one asks: did the gods really need it? Or did the priests simply build a machine that ran on human pain? Because if the sun rises every day without our blood, then the rituals were never about gods at all. They were about control. They were about obedience. They were about ensuring that men never learned the truth, that their life force was their own. And when you see this clearly, something happens inside you. You feel it, don't you? That quiet rage, that realization that the same forces still harvest you today. You do not bleed on bark paper anymore, but your hours, your desires, your very willpower drip away into systems that feed on you just the same. The blood has changed. The sacrifice has not. The Maya called it sacred duty. Priests called it divine necessity. But beneath the chants and smoke, there was only one truth: the spilling of blood was theater, designed to keep men enslaved to fear, and to keep power concentrated in the hands of a few. And yet, this pattern did not die with them. It did not crumble when their cities were swallowed by jungle, when their stone temples fell silent. No. It evolved. It adapted. It learned new languages, new costumes, new disguises. Look around you. Do you really think the blueprint of control has disappeared? Today, you don't kneel before stone gods. You kneel before corporations, governments, ideologies. You don't bleed from stingray spines, but you bleed every day in different ways. Your time. Your energy. Your dreams. They are drained drop by drop, not onto bark paper, but into systems that consume them without end. They tell you it's for duty, for security, for progress. But ask yourself, progress for who? Security for what? Duty to whom? This is the same theater, only modernized. The stage has changed, but the play is identical: keep men sacrificing, keep them silent, keep them obedient. Convince them that their pain is noble, their exhaustion honorable, their submission necessary for the survival of the whole. The Maya kings believed their blood kept the sun alive. You've been taught your labor keeps society alive. And both illusions serve the same master: control. But here's where the danger shifts into revelation. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you realize your suffering is being harvested, you face the same choice the Maya prince faced as he held the stingray spine: do you endure for them, or do you claim your pain, your blood, your life as your own? Understand this: systems of power only survive as long as you agree to feed them. When enough men awaken, when enough men say, "My blood is mine," the illusion breaks. And when illusions break, empires fall. This knowledge is dangerous because it changes you forever. You've been pulled into the chamber. You've seen behind the veil. And now the decision is yours: remain the vessel, or reclaim the fire that was stolen from you. The gods are no longer watching. But the empire still is.